Welcome to Chrono Tales, a place where time, myths, and human nature collide. Here we dive into the forgotten corners of history, the minds of killers, the secrets behind strange events, and the stories too dark to be told anywhere else. Every tale you hear is drawn from the past, from the shadows, and from the people who lived it. So turn down the lights and listen closely. The Blood Pact of the Samurai. There is something haunting about a man who walks toward his death with a calm heart. The samurai called it Bushido, the way of the warrior. But it was more than discipline or duty. It was a pact written not on paper, but in blood and silence. A covenant between a man, his blade, and the truth of his mortality. In modern eyes, it may look like madness, a man bowing to death instead of avoiding it. But in the age of the samurai, death was not the end. It was the mirror in which the warrior saw his soul. Imagine dawn over a misty field in the 16th century Japan. The smell of rain and iron in the air. Two figures stand facing each other, motionless, as if carved from stone. Their armor is battered, their faces unreadable. Between them, the silence hums louder than any battle cry. One of them exhales slowly. He knows he will not survive the next few moments, yet there is peace in his eyes. Not courage, not madness, something older. Acceptance. To understand the samurai is to understand this, that life gains meaning only in the presence of death. Everything they did, their art, poetry, tea ceremonies, and swordsmanship, was shaped by this awareness. To live beautifully, one must be willing to die beautifully. To fall without resistance, like a cherry blossom carried away by the wind. The Western world glorifies survival. We build walls against pain, laws against danger, and systems against death. The samurai dismantled those walls. They believed the only way to live truthfully was to stand naked before oblivion and smile. That was their blood pact. To remain unafraid in a world that constantly demands fear. But how did such a code take root? To find the answer, we must go back to the Sengoku period, the Warring States era, a time when Japan was a mosaic of chaos, blood, and ambition. Loyalty was fragile, betrayal common, and death a daily visitor. The samurai were born in this storm. Not knights in shining armor, but wolves wrapped in silk. Men who found honor not in victory, but in the manner of their defeat. The idea of Bushido didn't begin as a philosophy. It was survival instinct spiritualized. When life is constant war, you either go mad or find poetry in the carnage. The samurai chose poetry. They believed their death could sing, that in dying well they could give beauty to a meaningless world. And so they created rituals around death. The kateki uchi, the vengeance code, the seppuku, the ritual suicide, and above all, the vow of loyalty that bound a warrior to his master even beyond the grave. These were not acts of despair, but of defiance. A way of saying to life, you do not own me. It's easy to romanticize the samurai, to picture them as stoic heroes in ink paintings, but the truth was far darker. Many were cruel, vain, or hypocritical. Some killed without reason. Others sought power in the name of honor. Yet even in their corruption, there was something brutally honest about them. They did not pretend to be saints. They knew the cost of their path, and they paid it. In the 17th century, the philosopher Yamamoto Tsunetomo wrote in the Hagakure that the way of the samurai is found in death. He meant that a warrior must consider himself already dead, so that in life he could act without hesitation or fear. The modern mind rebels at this. We are taught to preserve ourselves at all costs. But what if the samurai were right? What if freedom begins where fear ends? Every generation builds its own Bushido, whether it knows it or not. We make blood pacts with our work, our lovers, our beliefs. We sacrifice sleep, time, and sanity in the name of meaning. But unlike the samurai, our deaths are slow. We kill ourselves in tiny increments, through comfort, routine, and distraction. And all the while, we tell ourselves we are surviving. There's a story of a young retainer who failed to avenge his lord's death. Dishonored, he was ordered to commit seppuku. He wrote one final poem before drawing the blade. Even in death, the flower blooms. Even in shame, the heart remains pure. He smiled as he cut his belly open. The witnesses wept not for his pain, but for the beauty of his resolve. They saw in him what we have forgotten, the grace of surrender. To die well is not to give up. It is to give everything. The samurai understood that the meaning of life is not in its length but in its depth. They did not live long lives, but they lived wide ones, each moment stretching into eternity through awareness and courage. In modern terms, we call this mindfulness or presence. But for them, it wasn't about relaxation or self-help. It was about staring straight into the void and keeping your spine straight. The samurai meditated not to find peace, but to prepare for the chaos of death. Their stillness was forged in violence. If you look closely, the same spirit lives in us today. In soldiers who go to war knowing they might not return. In firefighters running toward flames. In anyone who risks their safety for a higher purpose. That is Bushido, reborn in silence. The Blood Pact renewed by every act of courage. But there is another side to this story. The illusion of meaning. Many samurai fought for lords who were corrupt, causes that were hollow, and wars that led nowhere. They died bravely, yes, but for what? A name, a banner, a fleeting ideal of honor. This is where the tragedy lies. When a noble spirit binds itself to an empty cause, honor becomes a cage. The samurai learned too late that loyalty without wisdom is just another form of slavery. Their devotion was absolute, and that is both their greatness and their doom. The modern world is not so different. We give our lives to corporations, ideologies, influencers, and digital wars. We bleed for symbols, just like they did. Only our swords are smartphones, and our masters invisible. The battlefield has changed, but the Blood Pact remains. We still trade freedom for belonging. The question is, do we know who we are dying for? The samurai believed that dying for one's master was the highest virtue. But the deeper truth, whispered in the tea houses and the haiku of wandering monks, was this: the only master worth dying for is the truth itself. The wandering ronin, masterless and exiled, embodied this paradox. Cast out from their clans, they roamed the land as outlaws or poets. Some became killers for hire, others hermits. Yet many found a strange liberation in their exile. Without a lord to serve, they served only the way, the Tao, the truth, the blade that cuts illusion. One such man was Miyamoto Musashi, Japan's most legendary swordsman. He fought over 60 duels and never lost. But what set him apart was not his skill, it was his understanding. In his final years, he withdrew to a cave and wrote The Book of Five Rings, a meditation on combat, art, and existence. He taught that the ultimate battle is within, that the sword must cut through ignorance before it can touch an enemy. Musashi's final lesson was simple: perceive that which cannot be seen. To him, the true warrior was not the killer of men, but the destroyer of illusion. And that brings us back to the illusion of meaning. Every philosophy, every religion, every moral code, even Bushido, can become a trap if followed blindly. Meaning, like the sword, must be held lightly. Once you grip it too tightly, it cuts you. Perhaps this is the paradox of honor. It gives purpose to life, but can also consume it. The samurai lived and died by this blade. And yet, maybe that's why their story endures. They remind us that meaning is not something we find, but something we forge, moment by moment, strike by strike. In the end, The Blood Pact of the samurai is not about violence or obedience. It is about the courage to face the void without flinching, to act rightly, even when no one watches, to live so truthfully that death itself bows in respect. When a samurai drew his blade, he wasn't preparing to kill, he was preparing to reveal. The cut was not against the enemy, but against the self, against hesitation, fear, and illusion. Every swing was an act of purification. And maybe that's what we're all seeking. A way to cut through the noise of modern life and remember what matters. We won't find it in comfort or certainty, but in the quiet courage to face what we fear. That is the true Bushido, the way of living with death at your shoulder and still choosing grace. The world doesn't need more men chasing victory. It needs more men ready to lose beautifully. Because in the end, the only thing more terrifying than death is a life unlived.